皆さんこんにちは、あきえです。今日も指輪物語、炎上している理由を説明する動画のパート5ですね。じゃあ早速始めようかな。今回話す話題は、イギリスがいろんな神話を失ったので、トールキンはイギリスのために神話を与えた。登場するキャラは中世時代のヨーロッパ人の見た目をするはず。トールキンが作った世界にマイノリティ系の一族、王国などがすでに存在していたので、エルフ、ドワーフとホビットの人種を変える必要はなかった。女性のドワーフ、自分が初のうんたらかんたらとポリコレ自慢していた俳優達、そしてファンがジャクソン三部作と比べるのは当然だ。まずはみんなに聞きたいことがある。イギリスの神話といえば何を思い浮かぶでしょう？おそらくアーサー王とかベアウルフでしょうね。でもそれ以外にパッと思い浮かべるイギリスの神話は特にある？特にないよね。ちょっと少ないよね。イギリスにはそういう神話がちょっと少ない理由はね、ずっと他国の、一族とか王国に支配されていた、国だったんだもんね。そういうローマ人とかバイキングとかノルマン人とか、そして言葉自体、英語自体はそういうフランス語を話すノルマン人によって変えられたよね。そういう言語も変えられたよね。で、確かにノルマン人だったっけ、ある大きな図書館が焼かれたとか、そういうのを聞いたけど、調べた時に名前全然覚えられなくて確認できなかったんだけど、そういう大きな図書館が焼かれた時に、そういうおそらくいろんな神話とかそういう物語がなくなっちゃったかもね。だから他のヨーロッパの国と比べてイギリスはちょっと、神話がちょっと少ないよね。そしてトルキンは過去の文化を大切にしていた人だったので、そういうね、他のヨーロッパの国文化に自分なりの、そういう神話とかがあったんだけど、イギリスにはなかなかなくて、ちょっと少ないし、彼的には好みじゃなかったとか、そういう聞いたけど、だから彼は、イギリスのためにそういう神話を作ってあげた。確かにホビットは多分もともと子供たちのためにそういう面白い物語を作ったんでしょうけど、同時にイギリスの失われた神話としてそういう役割を果たしてる的な、ずっと外国に支配されていた一族だったよね。そういうバイキングが攻撃しに来ると、そういう教会とか、そういうところを焼いていたと、聞いたんだけど、そういうところではそういういろんな記録されたものがあって、焼かれるとね、どんどんなくなっちゃうからね、図書館とか教会とかそういうそこにあるものが盗まれたとか焼かれたとか、なんとなくわかるよね。だからこそ指輪物語はイギリス人にとってかなり重要な作品だ。世界中で有名な物語になったからだけではなく、自分の文化になかったもの、失われたものを何かを与えたね。ただのフィクションの作品じゃない。イギリスという国にとってかなり文化的に重要な作品だ。
A passion of mine ab initio was for myth and for fairy story, and above all for heroic legend on the brink of fairy tale and history, of which there is far too little in the world accessible to me for my appetite. I'm not learned in the matters of myth and fairy story, however, for in such things I have always been seeking material, things of a certain tone and air, and not simple knowledge. Also, and here I hope I shall not sound absurd, I was from early days grieved by the poverty of my own beloved country. It had no stories of its own, bound up with its tongue and soil, not of the quality that I sought, and found as an ingredient in legends of other lands. There was Greek, Celtic, Romance, Germanic, Scandinavian, and Finnish, which greatly affected me, but nothing English, save impoverished chapbook stuff. Of course there was and is all the Arthurian world, but powerful as it is imperfectly naturalized, associated with the soil of Britain, but not with English, does not replace what I felt to be missing.
In the same letter, he went on to say, "Once upon a time, my crest has long since fallen, I had a mind to make a body of more or less connected legend, which I could dedicate to England, to my country." For Tolkien, this was a way of replacing that which England had lost.
How was England demythologized? I would say the short answers are 1066 and the Industrial Revolution. In 1066, the English literary class was eliminated or dispossessed. We don't know what went down the plug with them, but we do know that native English literature was replaced very soon by a French-based literature. And what we've got left from before 1066 are fragments. We've got Beowulf with Grendel, we've got Beowulf with the dragon, we've got the strange Sigil-Herwan creatures who come out of Exodus. We don't have any Old English reference to Wudu-Wasan, wood-woses. We only get people remembering them some hundreds of years later. But the memory of them some hundreds of years later indicates that perhaps there was a time when people really did know what they were, but we don't know about it anymore, because all that's been eliminated. So a whole tradition, I think, of non-human supernatural creatures has just been wiped away with only a few smears and scratches remaining. And that is something which happened to England because of 1066, which didn't happen to other European countries. And then the Industrial Revolution came along, and of course it came earlier in England than in other countries, and when it came along, it took people's interests away from the fairy tales and the folk tales which they used to get from their nannies. Now in Germany, they were still telling them in the 19th century when the Grimms made their collection. But when English collectors went round trying to make similar collections inspired by the Grimms in the later 19th century, there wasn't very much left at all. So by the accidents of defeat in battle or of economic progress, I think a whole native English world of stories was destroyed. And ever since then, England has not had, as it were, a native mythology. It's had to borrow things from other people, like trolls from the Scandinavians, for instance.
だからこそ、ファンのみんなは、アマゾンに対してちょっと、怒っていたよね。アマゾンの人たち、特に偉い人、そういうもうちょっと上の人がね、力の指輪の、番組が私たちの、現在の世界を反映すると、言っていたよね。で、そもそも指輪物語は、現在の世界を反映するものではない。もともとは古来の世界の方を反映するものだから、古来の、昔のイギリスの文化、そういうアングロサクソンとか、その時代を反映するものだから、そもそもつまりそういう物語に登場するキャラはみんなね、当時のイギリス人の、見た目をしたり、そういうもうちょっと古い話し方とか行動とか、そういうね、振る舞いとか、そういうもんだよね。で、ドワーフやエルフはヨーロッパの、神話から、そこから来てるので、ヨーロッパ人の神話だから、ヨーロッパ人の見た目をするでしょうから、ドワーフとエルフは、白人だよね。特にエルフね、エルフは特に北欧を思い浮かべるような、そういうイメージがあるよね。そういう背が高いとか、金髪とか、そういうイメージがあるよね。だからといって、ドワーフやエルフは、白人だからといって、トルキンが作った世界では、他の文化、そういう黒人らしい人とかアジア人らしい人たちも存在してるので、いつもストーリーとか地理と、関係ある理由でそういうキャラの見た目が、それによって、違うよね。そういうヨーロッパっぽいところにある一族は、白人に見えるし、そういうアフリカっぽい、ところに住んでるキャラは黒人の見た目をしてるし、そういう感じだったよね。 でドワーフは、そもそも山の中に洞窟に太陽の光がないところに住んでるからドワーフが、真っ白というか、私が聞いた話では灰色という可能性もあるとか、聞いたんだけど、そういう太陽の光がないから肌の色が結構白いし、で私はトールキンの、世界観に、詳しくないけど、私が聞いた話ではエルフは、種族として生まれた頃は太陽が存在しなかったとか、だからエルフもねそういうダークエルフとか闇の中に住んでいたからダークエルフと聞いたんだから、もちろん太陽の光がないと、肌の色も結構白くなるし、ある人はそういうダークエルフと聞いて文字通り肌の色が黒いと思ってる人もいるらしいけど、間違った解釈的な光のないところに住んでるからダークエルフと言われているとか、そうだと聞いた。力の指輪の最初からね、ドワーフ、エルフ、ホビットは、どう見ても同じ種族に人種が全然違う白人のドワーフがいるし、黒人のドワーフもいるし、そういう同時に存在してる的な力の指輪の番組ではね、ポスターとか予告とかそういう映像で、あれトルキンの原作と違うよねとみんな気づいた。もちろんファンはちょっと混乱した。そもそも太陽の光がないね、そういう文化になんで黒人ドワーフがいるのかなとかそういうわけがわからない、そういう科学的にでアマゾンはずっと指輪物語は現在の私たちが住んでる世界を反映するべきだと、いつも言っていたんだよね。でも多くの人は現在の世界でさえ反映していない、所詮ハリウッドの世界を反映してるとかそういう考え方とかそういうキャラの見た目とか、なんだかハリウッドの感じがする。アメリカでさえそういう感じがしないとか、そういうイギリスの文化がそういう元になっているもののはずなのに、なんでハリウッドに見えるとかなんでカリフォルニア州に見えるとかそういうみんな言っていた。そしてもしアマゾンはもうちょっとそういうダイバーシティをそれに集中したかったら、トールキンが作った世界に、すでにそういうキャラとか文化がすでに存在してるから、そういうわざわざドワーフとエルフの肌の色を変える必要はなかった。すでに黒人の王国が存在してるからそっちのキャラを使えばいいのになんで変えたのとか。で最初の頃にダイバーシティに集中したいと聞いた時に、ある人は逆にちょっとワクワクしていた。もしかしてハラド見えるのかとか、そういうジャクソン三部作でハラド族だっけあれだよ、ゾウさんに乗っていた一族、いや結構かっこよかったじゃない普通にかっこよかった、戦っていた時とかだから逆にワクワクしていた人もいるわ。彼らの文化見えるのかとか、待ちきれないとか、そういう気持ちだった人もいたんだけど、どうなったのかもう分かってるよねなぜサウロンと一緒に戦ったのか、そういう理由を番組で見えるかもしれないとか、もしかすると当時のゴンドールはあまりいいものではなかったとか、ちょっとね同情できる理由とかシーンがあるんじゃないかなとある人は思っていたんだけどね、そういう予告とかティザー画像を見てすごいがっかりした人が、いたらしいハラドじゃないのかこいつらそっちじゃないのかよかっこよかったのに、つまり、まるでアマゾンがそういう怠け者だから、その一族について全然勉強したくないから、そういうドワーフとエルフの肌の色を変えただけとか、そういうまるでそういう風に見えた。その一族のために面白い物語を作るのはめんどくさいからそういう、彼らの文化について何も研究しないとか、そういう印象があった。おそらくね、ポリコレ自慢したかっただけだから、褒められたかっただけだから辞書を書いたんじゃないあとね、アマゾンはドワーフのあることに、知らなかったのか、それともそういう怠け者だから、めんどくさいからやりたくなかったのかもわからないけど、女性のドワーフってヒゲがあるらしい。そういう確か2つの塔だけそういうシーンがあったように、ギムリーがドワーフについて話している 時に、アラゴルンは女性にヒゲがあるとかとかね、そういうジャクソン版の映画でも見たらね。
It's true you don't see many dwarf women. And in fact, they are so alike in voice and appearance that they're often mistaken for dwarf men. It's the beards. And this in turn has given rise to the belief that there are no dwarf women.
リサというキャラが、彼女にヒゲがあったと言っていた人がいたんだけど、もしあったらあまりにも小さすぎて全く見えなかったから、まるでヒゲがなかったような感じだったから、何にも変わらない的な。でそもそもドワーフ、女性ドワーフって男性と区別がつかないぐらい見た目が結構似てるなし、外に行くときに男性の格好もするしと、聞いた。女性ドワーフと男性ドワーフが隣にね立っていたら区別がつかないとか、そういうはずらしい。で、多くの人は逆にこれはポリコレ自慢のチャンスを逃したんじゃない？そういうトランスの女性、もともと男性だった人が女性になるとか、そういうそういう人をね女性ドワーフにキャスティングしたらね原作に忠実だしポリコレ自慢もできるしそのウィンウィン的な。いや違う、トランスってそうじゃなくて、トランスって手術しないまま自分が男性とか女性だと主張してるとか、なんだったっけどっちもう覚えてない。はっきり言うと私追いつけないレベルそういう逆にね自慢するチャンスが逃したとかいろんな人が言っていたんだけど、十分自慢していたんだけどね、そういう俳優たちが。そういうマイノリティ系のキャラを演じていた俳優はいつもすごい偉そうに自慢していたんだ。私が初の何々とか、初の黒人エルフとか、初の女性ドワーフとか、自慢していたんだけど、そういう自慢話を聞いていたファンはちょっと返事においこらお前が初の黒人エルフじゃないしとか、そういうお前が初の女性ドワーフじゃないしとかそういうファンタジー系の、他の物語とか映画にそういうのが、すでにあったから、ファンタジーの作品にすでにそういう初の何々キャラがすでにあったから、何自慢してるのとかで、ピーター・ジャクソンのホビットの映画でさえ女性ドワーフにヒゲがあるし、すでにねそういうジャクソン版はきちんとトールキンが書いたものを実現にしたんだけど、そういう俳優がすごい偉そうに自慢話していて、私が初のうんたらかんたらとかで、そういう毎回自慢話するとみんながちょっと笑い始めるネットでね、お前初じゃねえだろうとか多分アマゾンが彼らにあなたは初のこれなんですとかそう言われたんじゃないかな、個人的にそう思う。それか生意気の問題に戻って、そういうちゃんとチェックしなかったんでしょうね。他の番組とか映画で初の何々さんは何ですかとか、Google 先生に聞くとかあとねAmazon は力の指輪シリーズはジャクソン版とつながりがない、そういう関係がないので、この2つの作品を比べるべきではないと言っていたかな。別物だから一緒にしないでとか、同じものを期待しないでとか。でもファンにとってジャクソン版の映画はザ・トルキンそういう映画版指輪物語といえばジャクソン版だよね映画3部作と、ホビットの3部作も力の指輪番組と比べて質があまりにも違う差が大きすぎるファンが番組とそういうジャクソン版映画を比べるのはちょっと当然なことだと思う。しょうがないでしょジャクソンは、映画版指輪物語の、基準を作ったようなもの。ファンがそれを期待するようになるよね。あとね、力の指輪シリーズは時系列的にロード・オブ・ザ・リングの映画より前の、時代だから、ちょっと問題発生もちろん一緒にしないでと言っているんだけど、そりゃねファンが明らかにね比べるんだけど、そういうちょっとある問題がある これによってね、力の指輪には、黒人エルフや黒人ドワーフ、黒人ホビットがいるんだけど、ジャクソン版にはいないよね。みんな白人なんだよね。だから力の指輪は時系列的に前の話だから、みんなが思い始めた。あれ？じゃあ、黒人キャラはどこへ消えたのねだって、力の指輪番組では、黒人キャラがエルフ、ドワーフ、ホビットに、種族の、全部に、そういうマイノリティ系のキャラがいたんだけど、ジャクソン版の時代になれば、いないんじゃないあれ、どこへ消えたとか、もしかして、それぞれの種族に虐殺が起きたんじゃないみんなが考察というより、アマゾンが種族の人種を変えたことによって、大問題の人種差別問題を逆に作ってしまったそういう差別者じゃないと見せたいから、自慢したいから、わざわざ黒人キャラを番組に入れたんだけど、時系列が前なので、ジャクソン版時代ではもういないから、逆に人種差別問題を作ってしまったアマゾン必死で褒められたいからこうしたんだけど、それによってもっと大きな問題が生まれてしまったとかこれだから何も考えずに原作になかったキャラをぶち込むのはちょっと良くない指輪物語にある世界とか文化とか歴史がめちゃくちゃになる。そういう原作から離れたせいでもう全部めちゃくちゃになった。逆に問題を増やす。だってトルキンは全部すっごい細かく考えたからミスはほとんどない。そういうミスを全くしないタイプで、ミスがあったら直す。確かになんだったっけ、月のゲソをちょっと間違えたから、一生を丸ごと書き直したらしいと聞いたんだけど、トルキンはそれぐらい細かくしてるんだから、やばい、月が1日ずれてるとか、全部やり直しとか、そういう細かい人だったらしいけど、アマゾンは何も考えずに、原作から離れると問題がどんどん増えてしまう。世界観がめちゃくちゃになったとか、なんとなくそういう感じかな今回はこれで終わりなんじゃないかな。じゃあトークパートから動画パートに変えるね。前回と同じようにほとんどは番組が公開される前の動画なんでしょう。それじゃまた次回で会いましょうね。さようなら。
The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, is a prequel to nothing. It's not necessarily a prequel to the books, and it's definitely not a prequel to Peter Jackson's films. And what it's based on is roughly 150 pages. That's right, 150 pages of appendices at the end of The Return of the King. As Vanity Fair states, while Jackson is not connected to the project, his movies, as well as their spiritual successor Game of Thrones, proved that there's a massive audience for, and this is the key word here, immersive fantasy. Of course, many have tried to capture that same audience, and few have survived or thrived. You'll want to know why? Well, it's that word, immersive. You can't have immersive fantasy when you're trying to, as the showrunners state, reflect today's world. It felt only natural to us that an adaptation of Tolkien's work would reflect what the world actually looks like, says Lindsay Weber, executive producer of the series. Then, of course, there's Don Lemon as a wood elf involved in a forbidden love with another original character because we're in 1960. I don't know what the hell this is. This is supposed to be a female dwarf. Where's the beard? Dwarf women's role in society. Dwarves wanted their women to be protected from the other races, and they usually kept them concealed inside their mountain halls. They seldom traveled in the outside world, only in great need, and when they did, they dressed as men with similar voice and appearance as male dwarves. Even when they are rarely seen, they are usually mistaken for a male. All dwarves have beards from the beginning of their lives. I'm thinking you missed a great opportunity here.
Daddy, chill.
What the hell is even that?
Some of it looked good,
Yeah,
and some
I would
of it
say
looked
the
bad.
settings look
I
good.
did notice that they are kind of changing around, the races and the colors of people. Is that because of the whole, diversity amongst content? I mean, oh my God, this is gonna. I can already tell what's gonna happen on the internet. And all you have to do is click here, and then this is a joke. Evil cannot
did you
create.
see the
Fans strike
ratio?
back. Oh my God!
It's 27K.
Yeah, and through the magical power of the internet, I am able to show you, only for a limited time, the actual dislikes. I think the logarithm is still working a little bit with this browser extension. That is not good. Now, do you think that many downvotes are purely from people, the race swapping, the wokeification, as certain very sensitive people on the internet are about to that kind of stuff? And at the risk of sounding like those people, I don't know how to handle this, because Tolkien stuff to me is sacred. It is fucking amazing. It is some of the best content that you can get out there as far as fantasy goes. I just want them to do it with respect. I want them to adapt it, faithfully. And I don't really want, fucking Trump and fucking, a bunch of references to real world politics in my fucking elf evil lord orc politics. You know what I mean? I'm not into that. And we've seen how off the rails it can get with Star Wars, right? Admiral Gender Studies yelling at Poe the whole film, even when she's fucking it up. That trailer that we have here, literally, I have no idea anything from it. And for it to get that kind of reaction, it has to be from something else, I think. And I think it's from the Vanity Fair article. I think all elves are badass and have moves like this. But then I think a lot of people are commenting on his skin color, because elves are fair-skinned and there's no dark-skinned elves, at least not in the Tolkien lore that I know of. I haven't read all the books. So, again, they're saying, well, they want to see diversity on the screen because it has to reflect our real world instead of reflecting the Tolkien lore. I'm not sure. So that's what a lot of people are going crazy on. And then some people are calling others racists for daring to question whether the race swaps and diversity is a good thing or a bad thing.
It's very messy.
It's impossible, and it's really difficult because it to some people, I mean, I understand the argument, because there is places within the Lord of the Rings universe where there are people of color. And I don't mean token people of color. I mean diverse cultures that are not evil just because they're from certain areas. And so Amazon chooses to just go, oh, we're going to change things up, and elves don't always have long hair. We're going to do all these other things. It's like, look, if they can figure out a way to make sense. I'm not judging until I watch the show. But I promise you, if I watch the show and they don't address it some way, or say like, look, they're
not going to address it. There's no way.
And then I'm going to have issues with it.
And I think what it is I normally don't care if shows are diverse. So to me, it doesn't bother me so much when you're creating new lore, when you're creating something new and you're moving forward with it. But when it's based on something that already has established lore and you're changing things around purely to reflect a modern era or modern days, it calls into question the integrity of the material. If you're willing to change that to satisfy a particular political or social agenda, what else is going to change in the material? And since this is based off the appendixes, like the ends of a book and maybe it's parts of another book, a lot of this is going to be original content. So I think that is making people nervous, that if you're willing to change this and do this, that now you're going to put in current political stuff like Trumpism and all this other shit and try to say Trumpism is bad in the middle of a god. Like, are we going to have, like, I understand it's important to, show diversity, but are they going to put in white orcs and make orcs good in the universe? But it's like, this is Tolkien. The orcs are bad guys. They're literally the personification of evil. They're born from evil. I mean, is that it's going to create things, or it leaves the door open to messing with stuff, and that upsets certain fans. Now, are racists fucking racist, and they're always going to be racist? Yes. And are they going to speak up and say, this is fucking stupid, this is fucking ridiculous, and maybe hide under the guise of woke? Yes, there is a small segment of that. But don't categorize everybody as that, because there are legitimate people that are like, hey, I'm just looking for the lore, and I would like for it to be lore accurate, and I don't really want current politics in my show based on books that have established lore, because I'm on the side of the fucking lore, man. All right, now here's where I think the biggest contention is.
Where's the beard?
This, you look at this, Joe, what character is this?
No clue.
Okay, which of the races of the Middle Earth is this?
I think you can put me on the spot, because if I guess wrong, you'll be like, that's racist.
Yes, you got it. I was going to do it. Okay, I'm not going to do it to Joe. This is supposed to be a dwarf. And if you know the Tolkien lore, it's like, but Alex, back me up on the lore of the dwarves.
Yes, they're supposed to have beards. Sometimes, and they joke about it in the trilogy movies. They talk about sometimes to the people who don't know, you see a dwarf woman, you're like, that's a dwarf man, and leading to the rumors that there are no dwarf women, and it's funny. This is wrong, and this is stupid.
This is wrong,
and this is stupid, and whoever was in charge of this is dumb, and I hate you.
But can we really make actual real female dwarves? Is that what you really want to see?
Yes.
On the Amazon thing? The answer to some people is yes. The answer to me is, I don't know. I get at least give her a beard, okay? And it looks like they're battling orcs, I think.
Looks like it.
Oh, but those are the good orcs, by the way. These are the good orcs that love men and that love elves, and they just want to get along. And it was a misunderstanding.
Yeah,
you see,
they're
the
very
whole
sympathetic.
time.
Very sympathetic.
Yeah, very sympathetic, because they're marginalized. They should not be marginalized and treated disrespectfully just for the way they look and everything. Okay, anyways. I think most of these downvotes is actually coming from the Vanity Fair article, which I'll show you now. Dwarf looks great.
Yes.
Here's where we start to have problems. No. This is not, there's never been a dwarf that looks like this before. So Alex is going to say, are you going to, and same thing with the elf, are we going to explain these things, or are these things just going to be like, this is the reflection of the way things is now. This is the new human character. So this is a character completely made up just for the show. So that's where I think a lot of fans are worried that you're just going to like make stuff up, and it's going to be like bad modern day social and political commentary injected in the Tolkien lore, when there is so much rich lore that you're already discarding and already ignoring in order to fit into a show. It's like they just say, who are the people that feel so threatened by the idea that an elf is black or Latino or Asian?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you want to immediately call every single person who doesn't like your vision racist, I mean, if it makes you feel better, then great. But I mean,
it felt only natural to us that an adaptation of Tolkien's work would reflect what the world actually looks like. Wait, that doesn't make sense. So then why doesn't it reflect the world of that Tolkien looks like? Oh, it's saying, okay, it's saying our world, right? It's felt only natural that an adaptation of Tolkien's work would reflect what our world actually looks like. What? And did I get that right?
I mean,
but that's not, Tolkien's world is not our world, and it's not natural for that world to reflect our world, because
too bad that's what they're going with.
Where where are the white orcs that are nice to everybody? Where are you saying that you're being racist against white orcs? This is ridiculous. I can't believe this is underrepresenting white orcs and good orcs. And fuck this series, and I am going to rally everybody to find. No,
I want Mexican orcs now.
Tolkien is for everyone. Tolkien is for everyone. His stories are about fictional races doing their best work when they leave isolation of their cultures and come together. So they say, because Tolkien is for everybody, then we need the people who are in the story to look like everybody, and so that everybody has a point of entry and people that can feel fine. Fine. Whatever.
Explain it and I'll be fine.
For me, it comes from doing the source material justice. But what they want to do is hand wave and call everybody racists for downvoting the video for various reasons and being concerned of the direction that they're taking it. There are signs that they are willing to change the lore and change things for what Amazon wants, for what the audience expects, rather than what the vision of Tolkien is, and all these various things, and then reflecting our world instead of Tolkien's world. So a lot of these things make fans concerned, and I think that's why the video was downvoted more for this kind of stuff than for that.
But I have a question. What could go wrong when two novice writers decide to split off from the established literary work that people like?
Let me show you a movie.
Let me show you a series,
like,
called
what is
Game
it called?
of Thrones.
Oh, I forgot about that. I forgot about that one.
Completely ruining Game of Thrones, where I don't even want to watch it anymore. So I hope that this doesn't have a similar effect to that kind of stuff.
Middle-earth should reflect the modern world. So said the Tolkien activist, sorry, the Tolkien expert that they have on retainer for the show. Actually, no. Middle-earth should not reflect the modern world. Middle-earth should reflect Middle-earth, because that is what it is. And if that makes you uncomfortable, then perhaps consider that you don't actually like The Lord of the Rings. He wrote The Lord of the Rings to replace the mythology lost when his own ancestors were conquered and lost their history, their culture, and their stories. You want to talk about having empathy for an oppressed people. Tolkien is for everyone. No one is gatekeeping who is allowed to like The Lord of the Rings. Anyone can like The Lord of the Rings. Anyone can identify with the characters and the story. Empathy is identifying with someone that isn't you. If you feel the need to fundamentally change something because it isn't good enough for you yet, then perhaps consider the fact that Lord of the Rings actually isn't for you. Not because of the color of anybody's skin, you fool, but because you lack the ability to understand what Tolkien created like an adult and instead want to create some sort of juvenile justification for inclusion because you want to make it your own thing. Again, you don't actually like The Lord of the Rings, you like the idea of liking Lord of the Rings. It could have been mine. It should be mine. Give it to me. No, I don't think I will.
What doesn't make sense is with the dwarves specifically, that one is, I mean, with both the dwarves and the elves, but with the dwarves, they live under mountains.
Yeah, so
to my knowledge, the sun doesn't shine in mountains.
Yeah, it definitely,
from all that I know.
So here's the thing: it causes a lot of problems, and
continuity.
Yeah,
continuity issues, because this is a prequel. Here's the problem. And let me say this right. The problem that it causes is what happened to all the multi-ethnic dwarves, hobbits, elves leading into The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings.
I have an answer for you.
Was there a genocide?
This is from someone who was incorrect in this assessment, who was trying to defend the ethnicity of the dwarven princess. Tolkien based most of the races of Middle-earth on Norse mythology, and that dwarves were called Dökkelfar, which means dark elf, and were described as having dark or black skin. So them casting a black woman to play a dwarven princess is actually very accurate. Now, just some guy who is quite well-versed in his lore said this. He said, wrong. Tolkien was based the dwarves on the Dvorgatl, the catalog of dwarves from the Poetic Edda, like you were talking about. None of the dwarves in his books are described as having anything remotely close to African features.
I have been out to identify with Rurouni Kenshin. Is Japanese, doesn't look like me at all. But I'm not racist. This is the thing. I actually feel people who need to see someone that looks like them are so obsessed with race that they're actually racist if they think that they can't identify with a show that has people of other skin tones and backgrounds to them. Like, seriously, if you cannot identify with the human nature of an individual, if they are a different skin tone to you, you are an absolute friggin' racist, okay? Lord of the Rings, all right, was written to be inherently tied to a cultural and ethnic background. Tolkien specifically wanted to write it as an English Anglo-Saxon mythology. He wanted to create a mythology, and he drew from folklore and legends of this specific culture to create Lord of the Rings. That's where it comes from. That's why it looks the way it looks, okay? And this is what people are having a problem with this new trailer, because they have changed certain things.
Invented. They've outright contradicted the source material.
Exactly. And some of the things that they're saying is that they wanted it to reflect the real world, and that they wanted there to be, they wanted like themselves, if they are a different cultural background, to be represented in the show.
Yeah.
You know, it frustrates me because I just had a thought. Okay, we in Australia we watch like a lot of American TV.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that if I don't like American TV, or if I see a show and there's not Australians in it and Australian culture, does that make me not? Is that a problem then?
Evil cannot create.
You can only
destroy and corrupt what the good has made.
Who now? That's a. I don't think it's word for word, but it's close enough. It's a
paraphrase.
But where does that quote come from? J.R. Tolkien.
Yeah, not these people.
And so this is why people are having outrage. And the trailer is the evidence. Like, this is where it's going. You don't respect this. If you don't respect the source material enough to inject your own politics, your own political views, your own way you think, things should be, your own representation stuff, you don't respect the source material.
I think it's a different thing. I think what we're like, I think everyone's made this mistake, and I'm the only one that's seeing it because I'm a genius, right? So I feel like everyone is looking at the symptoms and saying, we have problems with these symptoms, but I don't think it's that. I think it's something deeper in them. We've seen for the past 5 or 6 years where woke stuff goes in our media, right? And Lord of the Rings is such a beloved work of, I mean, the movies are masterpieces, right? Same as the books, okay, for different reasons, right? We see something that basically everyone universally loves, everyone, and we're like, oh, look at what they're going to do to it because we see the symptoms, and we have all of this backlog of all this stuff that's happened with Wheel of Time, everything that we've seen over the past 5 or 10 years.
I mean, do you want to try and list them off? Then there's Terminator, there's Ghostbusters,
Halo, Mass Effect, everything that we love that they touch, they destroy. And that's how we know. That's why we know that we saw these symptoms, and everyone was already bracing themselves like, yeah, it's probably going to suck because Amazon, right? We were all just waiting for it, and it's been confirmed for us. Not because of us just seeing those few things, but because we have the context of the last 5 or 6 years.
For the lovers of Tolkien's work, Middle-earth is like Wakanda or Tsushima. You expect Japanese people in a samurai movie, otherwise you'd hate it too. You want Indian folk in a Bollywood movie, otherwise what's the point? You want to see black people in Wakanda, likewise white people in Middle-earth. Fans of Tolkien feel like they are forced to feel embarrassed for their culture, as if they are to be ashamed for the racism done by other people. I can relate to that, actually. I'm a Muslim boy with a very heavy Muslim name. A random comment I post and random people start calling me a terrorist, a pedophile, how many mothers do you have, etc., as if I'm supposed to feel ashamed or embarrassed or to suffer for something I did not do, and that I need to change my ways, or that I need to prove my innocence to you. But I don't. Neither do Tolkien fans. I'm a Tolkien fan, and I love the fact that they are all white and that there's no sex in the films. Okay? Yeah. There's a guy that gets it. Okay? Understands that there is a want, a desire to have a kind of cultural mythology that is distinctly related to your own heritage. And everyone can enjoy it, but you do want it depicted in accordance to what that heritage comes from, okay? And there is a racial, ethnic kind of connection to it, and changing it is as insulting and racist as changing someone else's cultural mythology or background.
It's set in the fantasy world, which is set in the medieval past, but with magic, right? There was racial homogeneity. How's that? It was racially homogenous, right? And so for us...
sorry, in which parts of the history?
Well, just in the past in general. In
largely
almost all places.
I mean, there are examples, rare examples, but there are examples of black people appearing in Europe in the past, but...
It was so rare that they had to mention it in history.
Yes, And it also depends. The closer you are to Africa, Egypt, and everything like that, the higher up thing. And so you find more black people appearing in the Mediterranean and stuff. But the further north you go up, the rarer it became because travel was hard. And when you get to, say, Britain, you know,
and that's the thing, which is
almost
an island,
like
next to
in the
France.
medieval period. Very few examples. There are the rare examples, but the thing is, if you wanted to be just representative of what that time period was, you would basically in nearly any medieval story depicting in the northern areas as well, if you just on a percentage base, like if you had like 100 people in the film, right, and you wanted to, if you were just saying, let's do the math, right, we'll have an accurate percentage thing, there was less than 1% of black people in there, you would never reach the 1% enough to justify having a black person in the 100, like out of the percentage, you have 100 people, and to justify a black person in that thing, you need a population of 1% of black people to justify, to have the film reflect accurately the racial diversity of that period.
I don't even think
to history, you wouldn't even get that. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly. It wouldn't be 1%.
No, exactly.
It'd be like 0.
It doesn't even reach 1%. You would need like several thousand medieval films to reach at the same kind of racial representation that existed in very like old medieval periods, right? To justify even having one black person in the film. A lot of the depictions of black people in medieval art, they often are wearing really fine clothes or in a prominent position, because if they reached Europe, they probably were traders of some type and they would have been wealthy and things. And because they were traders, people were they were more accepting and willing. Like medieval period, in many aspects, there were very little cases of racism against black people, but there was racism against people of other kingdoms and cultures, like England against France. There was a lot more racism against Jewish populations in the medieval period as well. They copped it a bit, but nowhere near as much against black people, and they were very rare as well to even justify having a bias or animosity between race.
I think it's fair to say that at this point, Amazon underestimated how much Tolkien fans would dislike their changes to his work. I suspect they thought some fans wouldn't like it, but I doubt they thought it'd go over so badly that they'd have to unlist videos due to downvoting and negative comments. Most of the backlash comes from fans stating that the changes aren't true to Tolkien's work. J.R.R. Tolkien said numerous times that the world of Middle-earth was based on English, Norse, and Celtic folklore. It would stand to reason that the people who inhabit Middle-earth wouldn't just share the cultural traits, but also racial appearances of those inspirations. A great example of another story like this is the TV show Avatar: The Last Airbender. Most of the cast are based on Asian cultures, and so their in-world cultures match their real-world counterparts in aesthetics, architecture, and race. Aang looks Tibetan, Zuko looks Japanese, Katara and Sokka look Inuit. However, much like the situation with Amazon's The Rings of Power, that changed when Avatar got adapted to a live-action film. M. Night Shyamalan decided to cast white actors as Katara, Sokka, and Aang, as he called him. He cast non-white actors in the roles of Zuko and Admiral Zhao, the main antagonists of the film. If you're thinking what I think you're thinking, yes. Shyamalan cast white or white-looking actors in the hero roles and non-white actors as the villains. When it came to the background cast, however, he had no problem casting minorities. So you end up with this weird situation where all the airbenders are non-white except for Aang. The film received backlash from fans and non-fans alike for the apparent whitewashing or race-bending of the characters. Partly because Shyamalan is a minority, so it came across as weird that he would alter the race of the characters to make them white, but mostly because it's not true to the lore. These characters are supposed to be Asian, so when casting a live-action adaptation, it's reasonable to expect that the director would choose Asian actors. People expect to see the world of Avatar presented as it was in the show, meaning the actors should either be or be able to pass as Asian. The same holds true for Tolkien's Middle-earth. He based it on Northern European cultures, mostly English culture, and the casting should reflect this. Tolkien created Middle-earth in part to have people speak the languages he was creating, but also to replace the lost folklore and mythology of England. Due to invasions and French influences, much of England's old mythology had been lost, and the remaining stories associated with English folklore have outsider influences. The point of Tolkien's stories is to be English in design and effect, and Middle-earth reflects that in its cultures, languages, and the appearance of its races. To change this, To remove the Englishness, or really the whiteness, from Tolkien's stories is to undermine the very purpose of his works.
One of the secrets that people love Tolkien so much is because of the world building. You get deep into that world, you forget you're on planet Earth, and you realize you're on Middle-earth. Middle-earth, a different time frame, a different imagination than where we live in now, and it's easy to lose yourself in. It's almost like the never-ending story. You become a part of the book. You become a part of the elven culture, the dwarves. You get in. It's just so many stories, so much detail. And if you slip up on one detail like Rings of Power did, then you're going to end up giving 300. You're going to get 3 million dislikes in the ratio. That's just how it goes. That's just how it goes, man. And yeah, I'm going to tell you what Rings of Power where you're messing up. You're trying to make Middle-earth just like the modern times that's going on now. You're looking at the posters. Look at the posters. And they thought they were slick. This dropped in February. When you look at this poster, you see a rainbow pretty much of different colors. You see different skin tones. And that's all good. That's how the world should be. The world should all come together and just hold hands. And race doesn't matter and all that good stuff. And we should be skipping on the meadows and being happy and dancing with the leprechauns. All that type of stuff. But when it comes to Middle-earth Tolkien lore, when it comes to J.R.R. Tolkien, you have to be accurate with the book. It's some things that you can slip up on. You can slip up a little bit, not by much, and don't make it look noticeable, but it's some things you can do. But the reason why you have this poster right here is because they want to give you this mind frame of, hey, we want all these races right here. We want to put black characters in this, and we want to do this. We want to make the elves black. We want to make the hobbits black. We want to make them Asian. We want to do this. You can't do that, and people hate that. Now, what Amazon will do when it comes to those 3 million dislikes on that video, they're going to hate you. They're going to call you R words. You know what the R words is, the prejudice word. They're going to use that towards you because you're not down with the agendas and you're not down with the propaganda that's going on with them. So they're going to use that against you. So get ready. They use it against me, and I'm a black man. They're going to use that against you. Don't listen to the hype. You're absolutely right trying to fight for what J.R.R. Tolkien. This is his work. This is his masterpiece. This is his art. If I go into an art building, I'm not going to throw paint on a Van Gogh. I'm not going to do that. That's disrespectful to the art form. This man, J.R.R. Tolkien, took his time. He took years building Middle-earth, building these stories that connect to each other, these bloodlines that connect to each other. Yeah, he did that. Don't disrespect that. But I'm going to give you a little secret about what's going on with YouTube too. Check this out. It said YouTube CEO defends decision to hide dislikes on the videos. Let's peep this out. It said on the downside, YouTube saw the dislike counts were harming parts of our ecosystem through dislike attacks as people actively work to drive up the number of dislikes on a creator's videos. The CEO wrote, and such attacks often targeted smaller creators and those just getting started. We want every creator to feel they can express themselves without harassment, Hickey wrote. Quit being a pansy, man. You're going to live in a world where people talk about you. You don't remember when we was coming up and they said sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me? Yeah, sometimes words will hurt you. But that little nursery rhyme taught you that people are going to talk about you and do this and do that. I promise you, if you make a YouTube video, people are going to criticize you and downvote you for no apparent reason. When it comes to this show, the teaser, Rings of Power teaser, People are downvoting it because they don't like what they see. They're not being mean. Well, some of them might be mean, but they just don't like what they see. There's freedom of speech. And I'm telling you, a lot of this freedom of speech stuff right here is in danger. It's in danger. They want you to shut up because they put billions into this show. They want you to shut up. They want it to be relatable to what's going on now because they don't care about you. They just want more money. They just want money. You're just a dollar sign. They don't care about you. They don't care about giving you lore. They just want to make money, make sales. They want to put propaganda in this stuff. And if you understand J.R.R. Tolkien, Middle-earth lore, Lord of the Rings lore, all that stuff, it wasn't about propaganda. It wasn't about messages. It was about dope stories. Period, point blank.
In 1951, Professor Tolkien wrote to a friend about his plan to give the world a complete legend, noting, "I would draw some of the great tales in fullness, and leave many only placed in the scheme and sketched. The cycles should be linked to a majestic whole, and yet leave scope for other minds and hands wielding paint and music and drama." Bruh.
In regards to Arundel, let us read a few excerpts of the depiction of elves from the very books Amazon has rights to. So in The Fellowship of the Ring, this is a reference to a discussion between Frodo and Sam about the elves. There are some, even in these parts, as know the fair folk and get news of them. Later, in reference to going to Rivendell, he spoke lightly, but his heart was moved suddenly with a desire to see the house of Elrond Half-Elven, and breathed the air of that deep valley where many of the fair folk still dwelt in peace. And then a later reference to seeing the sight of the elves. "O fair folk, this is good fortune beyond my hope," said Pippin. And finally, when discussing the elves' departure from Middle-earth, "But if all the fair folk take to the havens, it'll be a duller world for those who are doomed to stay." The definition of fair in this context is to be pale of skin. Therefore, this is not an accurate depiction of an elf in the Rings of Power. Now, before anyone says anything else, some will say fair folk does not mean a description of skin and appearance, but rather a reference to fairy. This is a very fair critique, but it would only be accurate if one has not read from the appendices F from the Lord of the Rings. Again, this is part of the material the showrunners do have access to. Quote, "They were a race high and beautiful, the older children of the world, and among them the elder were as kings, who now are gone, the people of the great journey, the people of the stars. They were tall, fair of skin, and grey-eyed, though their locks were dark, save in the golden house of Finarfin." Forgive me if I haven't said the word Finarfin correctly, but this is an absolute and specific description for all elves that they have access to. There is no excuse to get this wrong other than a blatant attempt at changing things from a Tolkienian mindset to a modern mindset. Maybe some of you out there agree with this change. That's fine. However, you cannot say that this is a good change and still argue that Tolkien would have approved of this. The facts are evident that he wouldn't. All I ask of people who are supportive of this change is to simply be honest and say you are doing this for reasons that have nothing to do with Tolkienian lore.
And quickly on the subject of female dwarves having beards, it appears that the Tolkien Gateway, which I referenced in a video right here, has changed their description, one that's been up for years. Originally, at the end, it said all dwarves had beards from the beginning of their lives. That has now been removed. And now they're saying in the War of the Jewels, all dwarves are described as having beards, including women. However, as published in The Nature of Middle-earth, Tolkien later excluded female dwarves when listing who he imagined with beards, stating that all male dwarves had beards. I would like to remind you that The War of the Jewels is a book that was edited by Christopher Tolkien and published in 1994. And The Nature of Middle-earth was not edited by Christopher Tolkien, and it came out last year. And the key word there is excluded, and that's why they didn't put in a quote. Did he specifically say they don't? But Amazon is choosing to misinterpret it their way.
This is the side of Middle-earth ignored by Tolkien,
That wrote Middle-earth.
that created Middle-earth based on Europe, yes, based on England.
But he
specifically.
somehow ignored all of this. I want to know how they're going to explain why every group in Middle-earth had diverse people that no longer exist by the time the movies come around. Like, it's like there was like a mass, genocide of many groups of people, but only in particular colors.
Yeah, so that is gonna, if this is in actuality the prequel to the Jackson saga, then all of the brown people get gone by the time The Hobbit happens, which is gonna be
in every race, and like every group. Elves, they're all gone.
Yeah.
Dwarves, nope.
Yeah.
Hobbits, nope, long gone.
It's gonna be a very uncomfortable conversation. That's okay. We'll just refilm those other two trilogies.
I just want to know how they're going to explain it.
It is going to be very awkward. Like, where'd all the brown people go? Well,
I mean, you can explain it for like one group, but like every group had brown people and they're all gone.
It's
the plague that only killed the brown people.
Yeah, I mean,
what the hell are they going to do?
It's going to be a very awkward conversation to have.
God.
It's going to be a very awkward conversation.
So watch them go back to the movies and like film other people that are different races and stick them in there.
Oh my God, it'll be like the special edition.
But it's like, so they go back and recolor people.
Oh my God, no. No, we're not going to blackface Frodo.
They film them, like the people in different groups.
It'd be like the special editions of Star Wars where they have extra people walking around.
Right, and they just add them in.
The issue is that Tolkien's work is based on English, Norse, and Celtic folklore. He wrote the stories to replace the English folklore lost due to all the invasions and French influences. He said and wrote this several times over decades. Middle-earth is basically northwestern Europe, mostly England. The native people of those areas are all white, so all the races of Middle-earth would be white. And we know that's true because Tolkien described what they looked like. They're all white. The actors can be non-white, and if they can pass as European, with or without makeup, they can play those characters. They just need to look the part. Casting non-white actors in a Middle-earth show is like casting white actors in a Black Panther movie. It makes no sense.
What is this? Look at my dude. They making them elves now? They fly now? He got a fade like me. And look at her. Look like something straight out of an Egyptian show. Y'all got Tolkien doing base jumping inside his grave. I truly believe, based off these pictures, based off these rumors, Amazon is trying to destroy everything J.R.R. Tolkien stood for. The Vanity Fair article came out about the two black elves, and you know why they doing this, because basically it's Black History Month and they trying to capitalize with what's going on. You know that Tolkien described the dwarf women as looking just like the men. You couldn't tell between the man dwarves and the women dwarves. And you know our hardcore Lord of the Rings, Middle-earth, J.R.R. Tolkien fans know this. And they was hard to find. They was rare. They was a rare thing in Middle-earth. So that description is already wrong. And the thing about the dwarven culture, that is a Nordic type of thing with dwarves. That's where it comes from, in that European portion of the world. They're white, pretty much saying that, man. You never seen black dwarves before, so Amazon, my boy who made Amazon, I forgot the bald-headed guy's name. What is you doing, man? I know you don't spend a billy on trying to capitalize on Lord of the Rings and all this stuff, but bro, you destroying it, man. I'm looking at this first look. You have already destroyed what J.R.R. Tolkien stood for. When I look at these pictures, it doesn't look like the Middle Earth environment. It just, truth be told, when I look at these pictures, it looked like something from Game of Thrones. I would have been fine if we had black people as human, as mankind, but not as dwarves, not as elves. I have learned individuals point out what the showrunners refuses to address or are too incompetent to acknowledge is that they are writing themselves into a corner. It is established that in the main story of Lord of the Rings, there are only white characters. And if this is set in the past, what happened to all the minority characters? The only explanation is a purge. A massive every class, elves, humans, dwarf, human, and because there are no minority characters later in the story, Fellowship, Two Towers return, only the white ones survive. So they, by blindly following the woke theology, are ruining the story by proving their own ignorance of the lore and mythology. This guy is on point. And don't ever let anybody make you feel bad. No matter what race you are, don't make people make you feel bad for not liking this crap. Because that's what it is. It's crap. Agenda is tied to it. Propaganda is tied to it. And they just want to force it down your throat. You don't have to let these people force this stuff down your throat. You don't have to let it. Voice your opinion, feel the true way that you feel, and keep it moving. When you go to the Hadrim, they was a little lower under the Europeans portion of the world. The Hadrim was actually the African portion of Middle Earth, the African likeness. You could have used those characters, but no, it's all about agenda. It's all about this crap. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about, since you guys may think I'm making this stuff up. They got a new black character, a black elf named Disa. Now, it was only one female elf talked about in the whole Tolkien Middle Earth lore. That character was named Dee, and that was Thorin Oakenshield's sister. It was his younger sister. The only female elf that they talked about in the whole Middle Earth lore that Tolkien ever talked about. Isn't it no surprise that this character right here is named Disa, and this character right here is called Dee, the J.R.R. Tolkien part? They're slowly trying to change his lore.
Someone writes on Twitter, I find the lack of facial hair disturbing. Female dwarves have beards, from Johnny Stray Cat. And we know that Amazon tried to do damage control for this, right? IGN came out and they had a Lord of the Rings expert, the Tolkien professor, on there, who I do know a lot of people know who this is. A lot of people are very aware. A lot of people got very upset that he got some backlash, because when you look at that, 2.3 up to 8.9 thousand downvotes. He got destroyed because they brought him on as the Tolkien professor, and he got a bunch of stuff wrong. So wrong, in fact, that he had to go later clarify it on Twitter, where he said this, again, Tolkien professor right here, a clarification on dwarf women. Tolkien says they look just like dwarf men. He also clarifies later concerning beards that all male dwarves had them. Tolkien, late in life, explicitly did not imagine dwarf women as bearded. So just to clarify what he's saying here, what he's trying to tell you about Tolkien, how he's trying to spin it, is that in The War of the Jewels, he explicitly says this quote right here, both male and female dwarves have beards. He says that. He lays it out. Then in a later letter responding to someone about beards, he says male dwarves have them. He doesn't mention female dwarves. So the absence of that in this letter is enough proof for the Tolkien professor to say that they don't have beards, because that's what these people are trying to do right now. They're trying to grasp onto anything and everything. And then when confronted with that fact, what does he say? I know, but clinging is just what people are doing. In doing so, where Tolkien explicitly did not. My question is, why? Why does this matter so much to people? This is a dude named Tolkien Professor. Tolkien Professor Corey Olsen is saying, why does it matter so much to people? We do have some other fictional dwarves here, and in fact, the Hobbit series, which isn't maybe the best example. I don't know if people really like that very much, but in this series, what did we get? We saw female dwarves. We saw female dwarves with beards. And fans were very quick to point this out, that it has already been done. They gave you the template. They showed you all of this. There's concept art that I've seen floating around. I don't think we got to see all of these different female dwarves, but these were the female dwarf concept art they were using before they settled on one of this. This is just one of the things we saw in the Hobbit trilogy. Once again, fans are showing that they are far more qualified to talk about this and respect this than Amazon is.
In one of the very first scenes of the movie, we had a female dwarf with a long beard. Wispy, long beard. Not closely shaven. Now, this was also further pointed out that there were several scenes that actually featured female dwarves. Here's one. Here's another. Here's another. I think there's at least 3 here. Yeah. By the way, they all have very large beards. Perhaps not as full as the males, but they're long and obviously beards. No man nor elf has ever seen a beardless dwarf unless he were shaven in mockery, and would have then been more like to die. They would have been more likely to die of shame. For the Naugrim have beards from the beginning of their lives, males and females alike. J.R.R. Tolkien. One of these respects Tolkien, the other one does not. We made a promise to ourselves at the beginning of the process that we weren't going to put any of our own politics, our own message, or our own themes into the movie. In a way, we were trying to make these films for him, not ourselves. Peter Jackson.
There's several dwarf female characters with beards. Even right here, it's hard to tell because she's a blonde. When they're running out, I think this is in the 3rd movie. It's been a long time since I've watched the Hobbit movies. There were several, actually. It's just funny, like, Peter Jackson seemed to have really wanted to try to get things as right as possible, whereas Amazon is just cash grabbing as much as they can. They didn't want to make her less attractive. I think that's why they didn't give her a beard. Also, why does her dress look like she's from the continent of Africa? Like, it looks like a traditional African dress. Like, this is Middle Earth. But whatever. Amazon doesn't give a shit about this series coming off as a Lord of the Rings show. They want it to come off as a Game of Thrones show, and that's pretty fucking obvious to anybody that's paying attention.
I still think it's pandering, and I think it's I feel like when you pander to people, it feels insulting. It feels insulting to the audience that you're pandering to. And it's like, oh, now you can enjoy this because you couldn't otherwise. And that's, I know for myself as a woman, whenever any game or movie or anything like that inserts a woman where she previously was not, and they're like, okay, now women can like this. It's insulting to me. I think that she looks strong. She's got a good dwarven build. But sadly, this outfit, I don't know what's going on here. We got Doritos all over, and we also got the Doritos dust on her fingers.
Now, of course, many of you might say, but they are just actors, they don't have to know the lore. Well, you don't need to know the lore of Tolkien's books to know that what Mr. Ismail Cruz Cordova said here was not really about the lore, more of a pushing once again the identity politics and the agenda of 2022 and the last, 15 years really, and making Not Tolkien characters, but token characters. Please, my friends, look at the screen. Ismael Cruz Cordova promotes the Lord of the Rings of Power with identity politics. There will no longer be a time where you can say there are no elves of color. Now, this particular set of words have been used by YouTube influencers much longer than by the actor here. So I think he might have seen some of the videos. I think that the videos of Nerdrotics and the like and just some guy are really being out there, and Amazon is paying very close attention to them. The Lord of the Rings of Power actor Ismael Cruz Cordova took to red carpet at the show's premiere to promote it with a divisive identity politics rhetoric. Cordova spoke with the Associated Press, where he told the outlet, "There will no longer be a time where you can say there are no elves of color." So we erased that one, you know? No, I don't, and you didn't really, because it only proves that you don't know anything about fantasy. He will be talking about, or he did talk about in this article by Bounding into Comics will remind us of it, that as a little kid he was playing, to be an elf, which is absolutely okay, but one would think that if he was playing to be an elf when he was a little kid, he would know that there have already been elves of color in fantasy. Just look at Drizzt, which is here. I am providing you with an example of Drizzt from the D&D, and he is indeed an elf whose skin is coal black. Now, this is a very different elf from Tolkien's elves, even from the dark elves, as Tolkien described them, because they decided not to go to Valinor, and not because they had dark skins. And the dark elves from Norse mythology, well, they did not have dark skins either. They were called dark elves because they shunned the light. And they lived underground, and in some texts they were connected more with dwarves than with elves. But let us continue. He added, "This conversation will never be there. No, I'm an elf. The next person that comes after me won't have to talk about this. That's what it means to me. I am sure, dear Mr. Cordova, that the actors after you will speak about it very loudly. As much as the Disa actress talks about being the first female dwarves on screen, which is once again inaccurate. If you consider the little people from Willow to be a kind of dwarves, there were dwarves of color and female dwarves, and you don't even have to go that far back. Look at the Hobbit trilogy, there were dwarf women on the screen, and they even had beards. Beards, I mean. And if you then look at this snippet from the Warcraft movie, well, these elves are elves of color, which is something that comes up everybody's mind when these actors are talking about elves of color and dwarves of color. It seems to me that everybody's forgetting about the other kinds of people. Nobody's talking about Asian elves or Hispanic elves. Why? Why is it just this particular kind? Might have something to do with the current identity politics indeed. So he continues, I always say that if you can see it, you can imagine it. Then if you can imagine it, you can create it, he concluded. Now that's a strange statement to see. I believe that imagination does not rely on one's evidence of eyes and ears. You don't have to see anything in order for you to be able to imagine it. Isn't it? The Puerto Rican actor says he's wanted to be an elf since I was a little kid, and he remembers jumping around as a child, aiming an imaginary bow. So at the time you could imagine to have an imaginary bow, and it wasn't that important for you to see it. Interesting. Well, and then the article continues with an interview with Benjamin Walker, who plays Gil-galad. The show took a reinvestment in the source material, and he went to explain what that means is, they should have written, that we went to his writing and allowed that to inspire all new avenues for the show, that it allowed us for some artistic freedom to dream up some other aspects of Middle-earth that hadn't been seen before. So basically, he reinstated what the showrunners said, in that we will write a book Tolkien never wrote. And I believe that if Tolkien saw it, if Christopher Tolkien saw it, not only J.R.R. but Chris, they would be extremely angered and ashamed what's being done in their name. And there is no wonder that Peter Jackson is distancing himself from all this, because this is really an embarrassment for everybody and anybody who honors and loves the name The Lord of the Rings.